Thanks again for joining us on another episode of Legal Unicorns. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Deshni Govender, who has joined me. She has a lot to tell us, some of the work that she's doing at the moment, specifically in the AI space. I'm very, very interested in. But obviously, the purpose of the podcast is to find out more about our guest, their journey, and really hopefully inspire the next generation coming through of legal professionals across Africa. So first and foremost, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
Brilliant. Well, I was a little bit late, so I have to start with an apology to Deshni. But then again, the only excuse I can use is that I have no idea where I'm going when I'm in Joburg or how long things take. So it is a very big city for those who are listening that have never been here. So give yourself an extra half an hour wherever you go. I think is probably the best bet. A short bio on Deshni is someone I've known for a couple of years now and has an incredible background. Deshni is an experienced lawyer, AI specialist, and gender champion, with all three of which we're going to be getting into today. She is a South African focal point for the global project Fair Forward, Artificial Intelligence for All, which is part of the German Federal Agency for International Development and Economic Cooperation. Deshni is also a member of the Lacuna Fund Review Committee, which determines the most impactful ideas and proposals that should receive US dollar funding for development and implementation in countries. A member of the advisory board of the South African AI Association, co-founder of the, is it GIZ? GIZ, Diverse Women in Tech Network, and featured on the list of the 100 Brilliant Women in Ethics for 2022. Deshni, you have got an incredible background. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to get straight into it because obviously we always start the pod with finding out a little bit more about you and about where you grew up and the kind of life that you had. So please tell us, where did you grow up and what was your life like way back then?
It almost feels a little surreal when you have to answer these questions, right? Because I look at my journey and it almost feels, I wouldn't say ordinary because it's definitely non-linear now, but I've listened to many a podcast and people always have these amazing journeys. And I was like, well, mine doesn't really feel that special when I have to kind of say it out loud. So I am from the east coast of the country, so the warm and sunny city of Durban, and that's where I grew up. I studied there, so I was at UKZN. Basically started my professional legal journey in Johannesburg. So once I qualified, so I did a straight 4-year LLB at UKZN and moved up to Johannesburg to the big bright lights of the city and started my legal career here as a candidate attorney. And I guess the rest kind of followed through on there.
Okay, and in terms of Durban, obviously Durban's a place I know quite well. It's a beautiful city, very warm most of the time, which is very nice. But did you have a big family? Do you have a family network? Are they still there? Were you only child like myself, or were you a big part of a big family?
Interesting that. So I have, my family itself isn't that big. I wouldn't say it was. So it's just my parents, my brother, and myself. So one sibling, quite nuclear family. But growing up in Durban and being of Indian origin, I think there's a massive sense of community and family. And that is very culturally, specific, not just to Durban or people from Durban or Indians or South African Indians, but I think just South Africa as a whole, we have this a very strong sense of community, a very strong sense of culture, a very strong sense of engagement with people. So I do feel that's played a massive role in not just my career, I think the way I think, why I decided to pursue law, what I feel inherently about when I have this very strong sense of fighting injustice. So I feel like that kind of shaped a little bit my journey on, I don't know, it's weird to say, and I hope I don't dissuade anybody, but I don't think I willingly chose law.
Okay.
So I didn't land up here accidentally, but I feel like something very deep rooted and deep seated inside of me. I think from the time I remember being a little girl, and it was always a case of like, why is the world like this? Why? I was this child that always asked questions and irritated my aunts and my uncles and grannies. And they're like, why does this child ask so many questions? And like, I didn't even know why I was like that. And it's apparently I have a very keen sense of curiosity and the need to ask why and the need to know why things are the way they are. And if I feel like it doesn't sit well with me, then I'm going to probably say something about it. And that has always been the case. I've always been vocal, probably labeled outspoken, sometimes too outspoken. And again, coming back to why law, I think that just the sense of I don't like things the way they are and I want to change things. And I guess it was almost kind of a natural path, not something that says, well, I want to go be a lawyer and do nice things in court.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting, actually, because we often find, well, when I'm interviewing people for the podcast or in my other guise as a legal recruiter, I often interview people and see them, and there's usually a very common thread of someone who, there's common reasons of why the person wanted to study law. Typically, sometimes it's family. Sometimes the father or the mother was a lawyer. But with you, you've quite clearly, obviously, rightly pointed out the sense of injustice or the curiosity of why things are a certain way. It sounds like you, at a very early age, realised that the world is not fair. Which
wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, wasn't.
If it will ever be fair, because fairness, I think, and we could go into a little bit later, especially in like an AI context. I think what is fair is a fluid topic. Like it's a fluid concept. You can't say something's always like. The more you look at it and the more you unpack it, you have a general sense of what could be deemed as fair and what is righteous, what's ethical. But I mean, the more you unpack it and the more you actually start to look at issues critically, you realize ethics, fairness, they're very fluid in terms of society and what society deems as okay. It's not this is right and this is wrong.
Yeah, okay. That's a really good point, actually. What is fair? Because what is fair to one person is then unfair to another. So that, yeah, fluid is probably the right term, isn't it? It's an ongoing topic. But yes, we will get into that because I know that you, as we said at the top of the podcast, you've got you're involved in that organisation, which is I definitely want to find out more about. But so you studied at UKZN.
Mm-hmm.
UKZN, University of KZN. And then you've gone straight away. You've gone to Joburg. Have you? You've said, right, that's it. The bright lights, as you say, of Joburg. Probably the right thing to do in the sense of if you're looking for articles or if you're looking for your start in your career, coming to the big city is probably the right thing to do, I guess. Not to say that Durban doesn't have opportunities, obviously.
Yeah. So without offending anyone in my hometown, because Durban still has a very special place. There was also, I think, a little bit more to that story because moving to Johannesburg was also a part of a decision, a wider decision. So my family was already here. So we were from Durban originally. And my dad at the time, who was working for Coca-Cola, was moved by the company. So he had an opportunity, and halfway through the year at some point, he moved somewhere around like circa 2005 or something. And so my family moved up at the end of that year. So my mom and my brother, he was still in high school at the time. So he swapped and then she moved up. And interesting situation. So I'm 2 years now into my law degree. So I started in 2004, the end of 2005. I'm like, okay, cool. My family's moved up to Joburg. I'm 2 years into my law degree at UKZN. And I come on over and I'm like, okay, maybe I can carry on the remaining 2 years at Wits or UJ or one of the universities in Johannesburg. And I get here and I won't mention the university, but I approached the one that I had an interest and a preference for. And I was told that, I'm sorry, our syllabuses are a little bit different. We're not going to take you to complete your third and fourth year of law. You're going to start from first year. And of course, and I wish people could see the reaction that you had, because that was exactly my reaction with a few choice, colorful words. And
I'm not surprised.
and so yeah, so the decision was for me to stay in Durban, and I stayed with family, and I completed the remaining 2 years. And in that time, I probably was like the frequent flyer person of the year, because in those 2 years, when I wasn't at uni or had time off, I'd be back and forth and back and forth. I can't even recall the amount of flights I've done up and down in those 2 years between Durban, Joburg.
To the point where the air stewards start to know you by
They know.
name and yeah.
The Friday, I had that Friday night flight, and it's weird. You start to be like, hey, you again, yeah. So that was me, and at the end of the 2 years, of course, then you're thinking, I've lived without my family, and again, coming from an Indian background, Indian community, it's not the most common thing, although I do think perceptions and ideologies are changing now, but like it wouldn't have been the most common thing to say, cool, I'm done with uni now, I'm going to go out into the world and do my own thing, get my own place. Like, it doesn't always work that way. So if my parents, for example, were still in Durban, I would have lived with them and I would still been at home and probably found a job, and in a few years kind of found my feet. But now, I mean, you get this kind of semi-taste of freedom and you're like, I don't know, maybe I did have the internal dialogue in my mind, like, do I want to stay in Durban? I'm okay, I'm doing my thing, but I like Joburg, but my friends are still here, and now it's a new city. You don't know anybody. Maybe a few people from uni are there, but everyone's doing their own thing. And at that age in your life where you have this amazing network of people and support and friends and everything, and the thought of just going to a brand new city and just starting from scratch, I mean, socially, and we almost underestimate the value of having a network and having people that you can call and just engage and just vent and sanity check. So yeah, it was a big decision, but eventually I was like, nope, no, this is going to be it. And then I moved to Joburg, and it was, in retrospect, probably one of the best decisions I've made. Like, deciding to come here and obviously be with my family but start my career in Johannesburg.
There's a few things in there that I really want to unpack. One is the university in question, which will remain nameless. I guess that was the usage of the syllables is just ridiculous. I guess they just wanted the money, really. They wanted you to start again and say, like, because they could have quite easily just slipped you into the last couple of years.
Or even allowed me to, like, okay, cool, we did our, civil or some 1 or 2 courses are like this. So if you do, maybe come into your third year, take 1 or 2 extra courses to fill up or something and carry on. But
yeah, if you were turning from being a doctor into a lawyer into a doctor or vice versa, I could get it. You start again, but not when you're just going 1-2 hour flight away, and it's the same university, it's the same country, same laws. I don't really, but yeah, it sounds like you gave them a piece of your mind and said, and I think the university as well. It would have been hard to not have your family in the same city, but you're learning, you're becoming an independent person, aren't you? And I suppose, and you're focusing on your studies and your friendships and things like that. So I suppose that worked out quite well for you. And then you joined the family up in, and I'm sure at that point your brother's flying because he's gone through high school and he's like, yes, he's got
winning.
He's like, yeah, there's loads more to do in Joburg,
Yeah, for sure.
But that's great. And then of course you get to Joburg, and like you say, in hindsight, which is obviously we all get, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to look back. It's great for your career, and I'm going to get into your candidate attorneyship in a second. But I know personally what you're talking about when you were mentioning about how difficult it can be to start again and not have a friend group or have a support network, aside from a family, obviously. It is difficult, and it's something that we get asked about a lot as well, because obviously a lot of the recruitment we do is moving people to different places. It's not to be underestimated. You can move to a new town, or in your case, a new city or a new country. It's all the same pressures. If you're leaving your friend group behind, it shouldn't be underestimated. And for people who are more like my age now, starting again becomes very difficult. In fact, my family and I moved here to South Africa, we were going to move to Switzerland. And we went to look at schools and everything like that. And ultimately, my wife said, I don't want to start again. I can't start again. You know, we'd already done the Americas. We'd done Asia for 8 years. And she wanted to come home. And when she said that line, I could understand. Yeah. It's very difficult to start again.
And it's not just, you know, and I feel like it's not just the friend circle, like the social element. I mean, one of the things that has been incredibly really eye-opening for me, and I wish I had done this earlier in my career, is just having a professional circle, a very diverse but professional circle. And one of the things maybe we could get into a little bit later on is like mentorship and professional mentorship support. Like the circle that I have now. So, I mean, obviously in life as you go along, you have different circles. You've got your social circle, your people that you would, you know, spend the weekends with and do activities with. You've got maybe people in like your professional circle be like, hey, Rob, actually, I'm thinking of doing this, or I'm writing this article, or I'm going to do this presentation for this UNESCO event or GIZ event, whatever. Can I sanity check certain things with you on certain legal things? And then you have your professional circle, maybe other people who inspire you, motivate you, just give you different ways of looking at things, sanity checking, soundboarding, just, you know, giving you that drive and that ambition to be more and do more. And I feel like they all interconnect, but I think people also just kind of miss that, because you develop this and you develop these friendships and people that you can rely on, people that you have a network with, people that know people that could open doors when you need them. So I feel like all of that kind of interlinks and interconnects. And yes, we have the internet now, but you know, you could do anything from anywhere in the world, but it's almost just not the same.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because actually that feeds into a conversation I had the other day where I was asking someone if they'd have done something differently when they were a bit younger in their career. And they said, actually, they said, I would have networked more. And it kind of feeds into what you're saying there in the relation of when you do move, you have to start that business, building that network again. So and yes, we have the internet, and yes, you can call someone up on Zoom or whatever it might be, but it's not the same. But you know, you seem to be the type of person who's a bit of a go-getter anyway. So I'm sure it didn't take you long to get out there and start doing and building that. You started your articles in 2008, I believe, at a I guess a small firm, Schwartz Attorneys, it says on LinkedIn. Yeah. And then moving to, which I guess you then, because the candidate attorneyship is obviously 2 years, I guess you then moved to the other firm, finished that, and then carried on.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a fairly common thing here. It's actually not. I've not seen it in all the other countries I've ever worked in, where people quite often will seed their articles and go somewhere else.
It's not common?
It's common here.
It's common here.
But it's not common anywhere else.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's not common anywhere. I mean, not in the countries I've worked in. Anyway.
And through this purely for me, what had happened was, so because I was in that weird kind of journey of, you know, I could have been in Durban or I could have been in Johannesburg, and oftentimes, especially the big law firms and, you know, the big five, we call them, as we call them here in Sandton, would normally take candidate attorneys, you know, like 2 years in advance or whatever for the cohorts. And remember, in my journey in 2005, they would have already been recruiting for like 2008, et cetera, right? So my journey it wasn't, I suppose, specifically my intention that at some point I was going to move. I mean, it wasn't, when you're in uni, you have so much of other things. I mean, things when you look back now and you think, God, they were so irrelevant. Why did I even spend my time on these things? And you're thinking about other things and other pressures and you know, like, oh, my legal career, what I'm going to do, what kind of lawyer I'm going to be, you know, where will I end up? Do I want to be in law, like all of these things. And I guess moving to Johannesburg was not somewhere on their priority list until it became a discussion point.
Of course,
so for me, when at that time, I was like, oh no, I feel so disadvantaged, because had I known, you know, I could have been. So I started my articles here where I did get articles, because I think that was the most important thing, not to waste time. And the firm that I was at that time did a lot of MVA, the word I'm looking for escapes me now. Help me, Rob. A motor vehicle accident claims as a...
Oh, okay, RAF.
RAF,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
RAF, so Road Accident Fund and medical negligence and kind of that field, which was interesting, very interesting, especially on the medical negligence side. But
Minefield. Yeah, real minefield.
But it wasn't something that really made me go, oh, this is so cool. I really liked it. So
it wasn't your calling.
It wasn't my calling, no. And so at some point I did cede to Smith Jones and Pratt, which is more for medium-sized firm, but in retrospect now and looking back, had probably one of the biggest influences in my life that I didn't know. So the firm, which is incredible, and fun fact, shout out to a friend of mine, actually a few of us. So one of the people that I hold, some of the ladies that I hold very near and dear now, who are like my trusted confidants and sounding boards, are some of the people that I've worked with there.
Oh, wonderful.
And we have been friends since 2008.
Yeah.
So a really incredible woman. Also, obviously, lawyers as well, who've all gone in different directions. But yeah, and that firm did primarily financial services. And that's kind of how I got into this. And shortly, I remember when I was finishing uni, and they had... towards the end of uni, we were doing the National Credit Act, and that became a big thing by the time I did articles like, what is this NCA? What is all of this assessments and all of these regulations and requirements? And the banks were all up in arms. So it's something that kind of put me in that direction and probably was a very large influence in my life and how I ended up here, where I am now.
Okay. So actually that seeing the articles moving into something like you say, was more financial services oriented. And then the people as well that you got
Correct.
to meet. It's interesting that you're not the only person, and including myself, who there's the one job at the beginning of the career that has the people and what you're doing that really sets you off on that rocket journey. I had the same. It sounds like you've had the same, and I'm still friends with those people now, 25 years later. And like you say, they're the people that you would call if you had problems, or they're people that, especially if it's a colleague that does the same thing. So, yeah, no, that's good. We have a very similar.
And they're gonna
start there.
They're gonna hear this when they do hear the podcast and be like, "Oh my God, Dash, I can't believe you mentioned us."
Well, shout out to them for helping you on your journey as well. Okay, so as I've said before, and I'll say again, this obviously isn't a job interview, so I'm not going to go through every job you've ever had, but it's just interesting seeing the moves that people make and when's the right time to move. I see from Smith, Jones and Pratt, you then move to Clientele, which is an interesting firm. Insurance, on the insurance side. You spent a couple of years there. 2 years is always a nice amount of time. You're still at the relative start of your career as well. So already you've had, for those who are listening overseas, the work you did before at the RAF, the Road Accident Fund. This is a huge deal here. It's a big business. There's a lot of money involved. It's a complicated field. Then medical malpractice and those kind of things. Then in the financial services space with the new National Credit Act coming in, which is well underway now, and then into the insurance space. So you're getting this interesting... sorry, I've just been thrown by someone who's looking through the window. So it threw me off a little bit, just out the side of my eye, but that's fine. But you're getting a nice introduction to the world and the world of work and what really makes Johannesburg and South Africa move and how and all of those things, the insurance side, the medical side, the RAF side, financial services, credit act, they also affect people as well as the business.
Correct.
So it's really interesting. So even by 2012, you've really had a good introduction to actually what's fair or what's not.
You actually mentioned something now that I think was probably quite ingenious, and it only resonated with me now, the way you said it and why it kind of makes sense. Like you said things that these areas affect people. And it's funny because when I look back now on my career path, or at least I don't even want to call it a career path. I feel like sometimes it's we delineate it too much from like what we do and what we, our jobs and our purpose. But all of the things I've done have, in some or other way, have always been linked to how it affects the world, but also how it affects people. And even in the AI space now, like what I find passionate, what I find the work that I'm doing is ultimately, probably now even more so, the impact that it has on people, I feel like I want to have a say and have a change on. And your little, I don't know, stroke of genius wisdom just kind of unpack that in a very nice way.
Well, it's telling me a lot about who you are. It's telling me that you care about people, and actually you've been asking questions since you were a little one, annoying your aunts and uncles, as you said, not me, not my words, by asking questions. And I think that gives our listeners or watchers on YouTube a real nice sense of who you are. You clearly are someone who asks questions and cares, and it's very interesting, those, I don't know, maybe one day when you retire, you'll look back on your career and go, I wonder if those areas found me or if I found them. And when you write your book one day, you can write you can tell us about it or explore it then. Then you moved into the National Credit Regulator, right?
Yes.
So again, it's another area that affects people as well as business, and really it pays. All of these areas play a really big part in South African society.
Correct.
You spent nearly 3 years there, investigations, enforcements, and everything. So how was that? What did that give you insight into?
It was. I feel like it's maybe worth mentioning for anyone who hasn't, probably not doing a deep dive into my professional profile like this, but I didn't spend a lot of time so after I qualified, I got admitted as an attorney. It was sometime in January 18th, 2010, long time ago. Flown by. I spent maybe only a few months thereafter in a law firm, and then I moved into corporate. I think also that played a different role in how I kind of saw myself and what I saw as important in the legal space, because I feel like law firm and the law firm culture and law firm life, I'm not saying anything about the firm that I worked for. They were incredible, and I was very lucky to have one of the most incredible principals at SJP, and he was an absolute darling. And so in that sense, I was, you always hear the horror stories of candidate attorneys and law firms and what they're made to do and the way they get treated. So I was very lucky in that regard. But I felt that law firm life really didn't resonate with me. And I wanted to go into corporate, and I felt that that's where change or impact or getting your hands dirty, as it were was really for me. So by that time, I think when I look back and I made that move to the NCR, I was really on a very linear, directed, but still rather linear career path, financial services regulator. And that was rather interesting because it also gave me insight, because we know we're always, all that glitters and we're like, financial services firms and banks, and it all seems so amazing. But actually being at the regulator gave me an incredible insight onto the other side and how people are impacted by financial services and how they feel about it, how they feel about, being marketed to and unsuspectingly so. And this was, all before we had we had started using algorithms, or at least it wasn't so proliferated where you're using algorithms and targeted ads and personalization and all of that. But at that stage, a big focus was also on the more vulnerable sectors of society, people that were getting, these instant loans and things that, they could be manipulated. People were getting, very usurious kind of contracts, and it wasn't being checked. And those really, really, really vulnerable sectors of society that needed the most protection, that needed somebody to stand up and say it's okay. Because yes, the focus was on banks and what they did, but then at that time, even though we are a market in South Africa that has a massive card penetration rate and an incredible banking system, there's still a large part of society that's still cash heavy. But in doing so, you still have these players in the game that would kind of find ways around and loopholes and keep their businesses under the radar. So, and then there was debt review, of course, the debt review component.
Yeah.
And all of the things that went on with the so-called, oh, well, you're in debt because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, call me and we can get you out of it. So there were a lot of these players and actors in the scene. And I think that it was interesting because having been at a firm and having done NCA and done a lot of work for banks and on the, the opposing debt reviews for banks, well, at the firm, law firms, and then looking at how they see it and being on the other side was really, for me, it was what was needed to really get a balanced view of how things worked in society, how the state actors saw industry, how industry perceived it. And kind of the only people in the middle that kind of suffered the blows were the consumers. So it was an incredible journey to go in there, to be in that space, to understand. And I think when I moved afterwards, I decided, well, let me see. Now that I was in insurance and now I was at the regulator, let me go and see the other side of the world in banking. So again, still linear when I moved to ABSA. But it was for me at that time, I think I was at a point where now I was like, okay, cool. I've done law. I've done it in a very structured, but still interesting, but structured way. And when I moved into banking, I got to a point where I was a senior legal counsel, but product legal.
Yeah.
So, and this, it's funny because people often have this misconception of, oh, you're a lawyer and you're in banking. So, and it can't tell you how it irritated me to no end, and me with my very limited patience. You're like, oh, you take people's houses and you take people's cars. And I'm like, that's
really
not, yes,
no.
You would be amazed. And I got that even from other lawyers. And I was just like, no.
You say, no, that's my colleague over there.
Yeah. Just go one floor up there.
One floor up there.
Floor. Yeah, that's them. So product legal, I think, was where, so that first basis, that first level of financial services and getting and understanding the ecosystem, understanding the environment, the players, what goes wrong, what works, how consumers see things, how the industry see things. And then when I got to ABSA and I started doing product legal, where you would actually be in charge of a business unit or entire sector. So in my case, because I came with a lot of experience from the NCR and proceeding, I did unsecured lending. So unsecured lending is your personal loans, your overdrafts, credit facilities, basically that field. That's where I started off in and eventually rounded off my career with business banking in ABSA. But product legal was incredible. And that now gave me that second layer of opening my mind up and challenging me and making me think and look at things differently, because now you're not just a lawyer, you're a business partner. And that was some of the feedback that I got from a head of at that time. And I'm not sure, I will go ahead and mention her because even up until this day, I still remember that feedback. And she was at the time the head of personal lending. I hope I got this right. Yes, the head of personal lending. So it was Rekha Ramcharan. Hope I remember that correctly. And I remember so in corporate, as one does, you do 360 reviews because in corporate, and especially when you're in corporate and in a legal team, you're not a profit-making division.
Yeah.
As lawyers, IT, HR, so your value and your purpose, or at least as it was explained to us, rather indoctrinated into us, your value and your purpose as legal is to bring value to your business teams. And if they are doing well, that means you're doing something well. Arguable point. I'm sure lots of people will have. Truth.
I was going to say element of truth.
A lot of people will have thoughts on it. I have thoughts on it. Like I said, so it was almost kind of something that was kind of more indoctrinated into us to say that you show value by helping your teams. And there is some truth to that.
Some truth.
But
I have had this conversation recently with a head of legal at, I'll leave the name out, but at an asset manager. And he was asking me for my advice on the remuneration going forward. And what I was saying, and we agreed, was on that point, if the investment team are doing well, he was saying, if the investment team were doing well, then clearly the legal team have done well as well. And I said, what if the investment team are doing really, really badly? the legal team are probably having to work twice as hard.
Exactly.
And then that's where we stopped, because then he was going, well, that means that we might have less money, but I have to pay them double. I was like, yeah, probably.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
So I think that is a way of looking at value. I think where I am now in my space, I would have different thoughts on that. So at that time, I remember, so we do in corporate, you do your 360 feedback. So you get feedback from your stakeholders. So apps are internal. And I remember Rekha once saying to me, she's like, Dash, you're a really great lawyer and we love the way you work and we love how you're always thinking about, solutions in business and things. But it's good being a good lawyer. But if you really want to excel, become a business partner, not just a lawyer. And in that, and in this piece of wisdom that's still stuck in my head all these many, many years later, it was really trying to understand. I'm going to take a step back.
Okay.
So one of the things that I found now is that just to be clear, so right now, currently, I'm not in a legal role. I'm not employed in a legal capacity at all. So when you're employed in a legal capacity and you have a nice little email signature that says senior legal counsel and, or you're in a legal team in wherever your whatever the corporate entity is, it comes with a certain status and it comes with a certain amount of ego. And that ego I had crushed when I left legal. And it's a fun little story I'll tell you about just now. But it comes with a certain status also. So when I drop an email to somebody and says, hey, please find this, or please give me that, or please can we chat? People are like, oh shit, it's legal. We need to shake a leg and move on. So for me, and that should not be the basis on which we operate, but I took it for granted. And I think a lot of people do take it for granted because you don't know that this happens. And then they're like, oh, okay, legal was a chat. Okay, cool. We'll make some space. And so that comes with a certain sense of ego that you don't realize. And so oftentimes when we were like, but we expect you to know this and we expect you to know this, or please do it like this and like that. And so this piece of wisdom that Rekha gave me made me stop and reevaluate, like, cool, I need to stop being a lawyer and I need to start being a business partner, but what does that mean? And so it really started to unpack and unravel in my mind. And now it took a while to kind of figure out, like, how do I do this? How to become a better business partner? And in doing that, that kind of opened me up more to say, cool, if I'm going to be a business partner, I need to start knowing my business more. And that's when you really start getting under the hood. You understand everything from the product to the service to the end user. You work with IT, you work with compliance. I mean, we've always worked with compliance. APSA at the time had legal and compliance as separate divisions, which I thought was really good. But you really start to get under the hood and you get dirty and you unpack everything and you need to know. So in order to be a business partner, you need to know the business, which means you need to know everything end to end. And when you sit down with your business team, you sit down as a team member. You don't sit down as legal. You don't sit down as compliance. And that almost gave me a very different outlook on everything. And even though I could see myself as solution-oriented, now you start looking at things a bit differently because now you're like, in legal terms, we can do this. But now if you're putting yourself on the other side of the table as a business partner, you're like, does it help? Does it make profits? Does it reduce costs? Does it, does it help us competitively in the market? And these are some of the things you start asking. These are not legal questions, but business. They're business questions. But then you start saying, okay, for me to be a better partner, I am part of the business. I'm not just a little glass wall between me and the rest of APSA. And that almost also then started opening my mind up to how systems work and why they work. And obviously now AI becomes a little bit more proliferated. Things are, really more starting with social media, but obviously at the time where more developed countries were using it in banking services and stuff, like your get a loan in a few minutes, and there's some automated decision-making going on in the background. Even though it is decision on principle, so there is still some human intervention that is needed or some intervention that is needed. It's not fully automated. But then you start looking at, how do we get to these automated decisions? How do you unpack that? What do we look at? What is the, what are the questions? What are we looking when Rob comes and we can give Rob a decision in principle in 5 minutes after asking 10 questions, what are we looking at in those permutations? And that almost kind of unpacked and unraveled my mind on, okay, that's cool, this is interesting, but do I agree with it? Do I not? What is going on? What is this thing about AI? And what is this thing about, unfairness and bias and prejudices? That happens already. Like, that's not a new concept. And it wasn't something new for me getting into the bank. Historically, there are biases and prejudices, whether people were still sitting with a pen and paper, granting a loan or not.
Yeah.
So that almost kind of led me down the path of going into AI.
Wow. Yeah, that's a brilliant journey. Thank you for that. That really makes total sense as well. And it's lovely to see how your thinking was sort of infused almost by your I want to say your principal, but your manager's words, which obviously still ring in your head, but then the way you look at it also fits into the person that we're finding out that you have always been, which is inquisitive. How does that work with that? How does that work with that? And that sentence about you need to be a business partner, it's kind of unlocked it for you. It was like, but that's me. That's you. That's you. Just go back a step. You were going to say the ego was crushed when you left.
So
you left practice.
Yeah. Practice. I love it. So actually leaving law. I don't think the law ever leaves you if you're an attorney. But it was a massive decision to step out of being a lawyer. So when I left ABSA, I knew by that time I had already started personally my journey into AI and technology a little bit deeper. So even though I was still in banks and still in banking, where I think automated and honestly financial services, I think, was probably the sectors that were early adopters of automated decision making and assessments, and really I think banks are probably like the best use case you could for AI. But in this case, I had already started my journey wanting to do more technology, less law. So being outside a pure legal role and starting that journey, and well, that was interesting because in your little bubble of, legal privilege, you're like, senior legal counsel, okay, we'll give you the time and the space and the platform. In the rest of the world, they do not care. When I started first my journey and they're like, so you're a lawyer and you want to be in AI, so you just want to do regulation then? And I'm like, no, that's not it. So you want to do legal tech? No, that's not it. There is a subset, but that's not it. They're like, so what do you want to do? What value is a lawyer going to bring to the AI space? Can you code? Can you do programming? Do you have another degree? Like, there were all of these barriers that were, and they weren't, I suppose they were more implicit. Like, no one says, there's no value for lawyers in AI, but they're more interested in, are you a data scientist? Can you code? What did you create? It's all of these stereotypes around what is a lawyer doing in AI? And that irritated me, but then that almost kind of just burnt this just ignited more this passion on, this is such BS. Why is it so hard? I mean, it's hard enough being a woman in financial services and like kind of STEM spaces because, stereotypically women are not given the platform. And there are so few women who even pursue pure STEM careers. I mean, we're sitting at a global average of like somewhere between 25 and 30% or something.
I was going to say, I think last time I read it was lower than 30. Yeah,
it was just, yeah. And now somebody's like, what do you want to do here? Why are you here? And that just kind of, if anybody knows me, they know already I am just like, no, this is not flying. This is not going to fly with me. Not today, not ever. So I started then building up my technical knowledge on AI. I started doing courses and there's amazing MOOCs online, started asking questions, started getting more involved in banking processes, taking on some work, some volunteer opportunities. And because now in the bank, remember, you've built that network. You become now a business partner. So when you're saying, hey, can I just sit with you? You're going to do this, and that. We're doing UAT testing on this, which is ordinarily part of my role to do things like UAT testing. But I'm actually intrigued about that. Can we chat? Can we do this? And started building up my knowledge. So at that time, and I would still say that I a part of me was still like, okay, maybe I can still be a lawyer in the tech space, There's this fear of leaving it.
Yeah.
And so at some point I was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And out the door I go if I'm leaving law. And it was an incredibly hard decision. And I'm saying, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And I'm going to go in on the strength of my knowledge and expertise, not as a lawyer. Now, here's where the ego part comes in. So you get out of course, and now they're like, well, you're a lawyer. Why? Like, why do you think you're special here? You're not special in this space. Cool. And then when I get to GIZ, I remember the first few months. So now I'm there, obviously, as a country focal point. So I'm in charge of all the South Africa activities, but in addition, part of a wider global team. So we do global activities. And the first time I send an email, hi, can I do this, and this, to the country, some of the country people in the country projects. And that email will go and nobody responds. A few days, a week goes by. I'm like, hi, I'm following up, da-da-da-da-da. Nobody cares. Who are you? Why do you think you're important? Why do you think you need a response? Why do you think that you deserve some priority in people's lives?
Who are you?
You're not Desh Senior Legal Counsel anymore. You're just Desh in South Africa. And yes, you have an important job, but you're just another person in another project. Wait your turn. We'll get to you. So
wow.
I was inflated, absolutely just, sorry, I meant deflated. It was just, for me, I remember I called up my friends and I was like, ladies, I wonder if I just made the right decision. Because this ego crush comes back when you, again, have this level of legal privilege. And now you're just another person who almost now has to prove yourself from scratch. Because now you're not going on your legal knowledge. Now you're proving yourself in a whole different sector based on what value you're bringing. Your legal background has value, but and then what?
Yeah, your legal background has value because it's part of who you are. But they're looking at you going, so what?
And then what?
Why is that?
Special?
That's not relevant to what we're doing right now. So actually, you have to then go, right, I now have to prove myself again.
From scratch.
Because this is who I am. But that's a great test for you. It's also a great lesson for anyone in the space now where they might be moving out of law. You've mentioned a couple of things I need to pick up on there, which are great. One is the moving out of law. That's something that a lot of the people that we work with face. At the GRM group, I employ a lot of ex-lawyers or people who have stepped out of the law. And one of the things we talk about when I'm interviewing them is, are you ready? Are you ready to not be a lawyer anymore? Yeah. Because especially if they're a bit younger, sometimes I remember when we were in Hong Kong, we were predominantly hired lawyers, and same here. I would say, how do your family feel about it? Because quite often, certainly in certain cultures, they're very proud of the fact that their son is a lawyer, and he's decided he doesn't want to do it anymore.
And it brings a certain prestige to the family, right?
Yeah, so there's little subtle moments that one is going through when they're making decisions in their career, which obviously you've been through as well. Then you get there, and then it's like, right, well, they almost forget, they don't care about the past. They want to know what you can deliver now. Exactly. And actually, like you just said there, and you will wait. Because we'll get to you when and suddenly you're going, hang on a minute.
What?
Shall I put legal counsel on my email signature just in case?
LLB or something. In your email signature. What?
Yeah, just need to remind you that I'm. But also that's a great test for you, because I know from the conversations we had a couple of years ago, actually, before you joined the German group. I can remember very vividly, this is a passion for you. This is you. This is your area. This AI tech. That's why I was determined to get you on the podcast, because you are a real trailblazer in it, but it's something you genuinely are interested in, and it's so great to hear that you, even when you were ABSA beforehand. So I'm scrolling up and down here, but you would go and you would sit with people, and you were saying, can I sit in with that? Can I do this? Doing different courses. And this is a valuable lesson for anybody learning. Take control of it. Yep. Drive that passion forward and learn. And you did it. And it put you, that and your personality, your determination, your drive, your clear intelligence, and everything you want to achieve, that led you to the German group which the name is in front of me in German, and I am not pronouncing.
Please go ahead.
No. We skipped German at school. We learnt French and Spanish, but for obvious reasons. And you moved there a couple of years ago, and I mean, there's so many other things I want to talk to you about. And before we get on to AI, because AI is a massive topic. It's not just globally, but specifically in the law. And there's a lot of people that are nervous about it in respect of certainly lawyers in law firms. I know there's, and I have my own views on whether people should be nervous or whether they should embrace technology and change. But for you, I guess one of the things I always ask of our guests, and I asked of you as well, and to get you thinking about the podcast, was about whether there's been notable moments in your career where you've made decisions. You've already kind of listed a few here. You've clearly got a drive. You're clearly not scared to be different. You're not scared to put yourself out there. You are very inquisitive, which I am too, so it resonates with me. You know, why is that like that? Why does that do that? What effect does that have on this person? Which naturally would lead you into the tech space. Is there anything else that you can think of in terms of right now that drove these decisions to move down that path?
Well, I will say, and something you said just resonated with something that was a good piece of advice from the head of legal at the time in APSA. And I recall her saying, you know, there are two things, and two things that still resonate with me. Number one, own your career. So like what the stuff you mentioned now and the things that I've done was because I was interested, but I was also interested in moving out of legal. And for that purpose, I was very intentional about what I did. But this piece of wisdom she had given us in any event, and she told it to everybody, own your career. You are the person who is solely responsible for where you end up. And I agree with that because, you know, it's not your manager's duty or the head of team or whomever or your boss or somebody to, you know, just do your thing and then somebody's going to recognize your value at some point. No, you know, the world is very cutthroat, as is corporate, as is anything. If you want to get somewhere, you need to make a concerted effort to do it. And oftentimes that would mean going above and beyond, you know, volunteering, stepping up, you know, standing out. And that is going to get you to where you are. And the second piece of advice, which was very important, was also pick your battles. So even now in the AI space, you know, and in technology, in corporate, in law, in whatever you're trying to do, even, you know, getting to become a partner or, you know, salary partner, equity partner, whatever, pick your battles. Because if you show up to, we only have a finite amount of energy and, you know, intellectual capacity in a day that we want to, you know, utilize. Don't show up to every battle, because then it just creates a different impression, even though you might feel strongly on it. Pick the battles you really want to fight and know that you're probably going to win. And it also creates almost more or less it becomes, you know, the concept, your reputation precedes you. So somebody's like, oh, we know Rob. And Rob has stepped into the ring on a few occasions. And when he has done that, Rob's always come out on top. So when you do start picking your battles and you know you're going to win, when you come up against someone and that reputation precedes you, you've already won half your battle, because they're like, oh shit, this person, if they're coming here, they're going to bring their A game and bring everything. So I guess that's kind of a bit of a corporate strategy or a strategy you could use. But also it's important to pick your battles, because I think that you need to know you can't be passionate about everything, or you could, I guess. But what is really important and resonates with you, because that's where you put your time, your energy, your network, you call in favors, you do the things that you need to do to make sure you get to the end result. And for example, I'll give an example of this. So for us, especially in the space of AI, where largely we are still by and large consumers of AI systems. For us, what's really important is, you know, we've always said the phrase, need to leave no one behind, leave no one behind. But what does that really mean? And for me, in South Africa, I feel that's really important, because even though I am a native English speaker, so as a South African Indian, I'm very ashamed and embarrassed to say I do not actually know my vernacular, so I can't speak Hindi, I can't speak Tamil, I can speak Afrikaans and a lot of Zulu. So there. But even in that context, we're digitizing and we're moving forward, but the proliferation of languages that applications and services and products are being created in is not Zulu or Xhosa or Swahili or Kinyarwanda, you know? So for me, a very important battle, and a battle that I am fighting, is how do we make sure that we get people to learn and be comfortable in their language, and in association with that, take away this fear of AI. If AI, and I often tell people, it's all well and good when you're a native English speaker, such as yourself, myself, you can open an app and you can kind of figure out your way around or whatever. But take a step back. What if the most widely spoken language in the world was German? And we're all native English speakers. All of a sudden, everything is in German. It's all, we need to be German. We need to ascribe to being German. Where does it leave everybody else? It gives you this fear, because now I've got to do something that's not in my language and in a topic that's, almost perceived as complex and difficult. So already for me, being a gender champion, we know women are not in the field. Now you've got this element of fear. Now you've got this element of doing something in a different language to something you may not have been raised, comfortable speaking, and for me, it's really a case of, this is a battle I'm going to fight, and this is a battle I'm going to win. And how can we digitize and make South African languages have data sets, have the ability to learn in a local language that also then bridges the gender digital divide of the lack of females in there, but also people not saying, I need to be English and I need to speak English in order to sound smart, in order to participate. I don't want people to assimilate. And for me, that's an important fight, and a fight that I'm currently, a battle that's still ongoing, but hopefully making some strides in.
Own the future of recruitment today. Access a secured, anonymized global talent pool. Connect with qualified candidates through multiple private label databases. By creating your own Stintit, you can achieve the following. Step 1. Access your company dashboard by logging in. Step 2. Click Find Candidate to search for the ideal candidate. To begin, create a new position and fill in the necessary details. The system will search through multiple databases to find the ideal match for you. Step 3. Once the search is completed, you will instantly receive multiple 100% matches, which have all been fully verified and KYC checked. Step 4. When the candidate chooses to opt in, you can view their skill set and experience. Only when you are satisfied, use your credit to unlock the candidate's full profile. Once unlocked, the profile remains unlocked for all future searches. What makes this system truly revolutionary is that when you search, the search will continue in all the different databases until a 100% match is found. Each database involved and the candidate share in the revenue, and that's how this circular revenue model and shared database benefit all parties involved.
Amazing. I'm gonna bring you back to that point. I think that's something that I really want to delve into. There's quite a few points in there that I want to pick up on, but the two pieces of advice that you've passed on there as well, go back about 5 minutes, I couldn't agree more. I think that owning one's career is something I talk about a lot, especially going forward. If anybody listening to this also had the chance to listen to the interview I had with Aurora Sang recently, she talked about it the same, in a slightly different but similar way, about not putting that emphasis on your employer, not putting that emphasis on you or whatever it may be, your community or your church or your family. It's you. You have to own every aspect of what you're doing going forward. And I like that owning your career is something that I'm very passionate about. We've just done a big research project where we took a little bit of work with LexisNexis, and we expanded on that. And the legal industry is going one way, and that is everybody's becoming an independent. By 2035, the statistics will show us that nearly 3/4 of all lawyers will work for themselves. They'll work in the gig economy globally.
Wow.
You won't have these giant, great big buildings anymore. You will have big firms that will have a small management team, a bunch of 100 rainmakers or whatever. They won't have huge numbers of associates and senior associates, and there won't be that people will be brought in on projects.
Oh, wow.
And that is the future. It's definitely happening. It's already happening. AI has a big part to play in that in terms of the technology that will be available, and law firms will be much smaller and more nimble. And I'm talking to people now saying, don't wait for 2035. It's 2023. Start taking control now.
How do law firms feel about that? Sorry, I'm going off topic now.
No,
That's
the point is that we can talk about
I'm so intrigued. Like, how do I can understand the business case of it, but
some of them don't believe me, and some of them
the law firms or the lawyers.
No, the lawyers do, but some of the law firms I've spoken to, regardless of size, some don't see anything changing, and some do, and some don't. Some don't know what's coming. But I'm telling you now, this is not just Rob Green sitting here going, I reckon. This is based on data and analysis, reports and research that we've done, and also have been done by many others, bigger organizations globally than us. And the picture I have in my head, or the picture that many people have in their heads of the law firm of the future, is big firm with professional indemnity insurance, obviously, important. The management team, a handful of rainmakers who hold the client relationships, and then they bring in experts like you, for instance. They might come in and say, right, we've got an AI project, we need Deshni in, we'll pay her a fortune because she's very expensive, bring her in for her expertise alongside these other experts. We'll get that piece of work done, and then we go away. I think a lot of the law firms are going to enjoy working like that, because it'll bring down costs, and it will hone in on using the best people. It will change recruitment completely. It changes, the mentality of, we must hire that associate and they're mine. It's what we're doing is we're empowering the younger generation now coming through, getting them to think like this, getting them to build on their skill set, getting them to build on their knowledge, and say, in 5 years' time, you are going to be a very valuable commodity that every firm is going to want. And there's nothing to say that you can't work with all of them. With all of them,
because now it's no longer just I'm a associate at X, or a senior associate or partner at Y. I mean, we've seen this already with the shift of the billable hour. And I look back now and I laugh, and I was like, somehow law firms for me just didn't do it, and it's just me, right? It's a me thing. But I look, with the advent of intersectionality and not just, maybe let's not use intersectionality in a general context, intersectional topics of which technology features centrally, and law being a critical component of that. You see this intersectionality coming in, and then you're like, okay, what does that mean for a lawyer? And I feel like right now, people have to be, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a data scientist, whether you're, a coder or a programmer, there's value in being a subject matter expert, but being a subject matter expert does not mean that you're still now in your little professional box anymore. And I feel like coming off with this concept of, law firms really looking at the way they do billable hours now it's really, let's look at the value we bring on your project. Let's look at how we do things, because now the remuneration structure changes. And I feel like it's an important point you raise about, being a legal consultant, because now you only cannot even come with just saying, well, I'm a specialist in IP. And then what, So you need to really bring some intersectional knowledge on IP and AI, or IP and generative AI or chatbots or whatever.
And being a business partner.
And being the business partner,
and going, I understand where your business is going, or I understand it,
or why,
or could be, or why, or where it might want to go, and be much more strategic. And they don't have to be, again, people coming straight out of university will struggle to have that experience, but you start building that experience now.
Correct.
And also don't forget, I mean, again, I would never even guess or ask a lady how old they are, but of my generation,
I love it.
My generation, if we wanted to be trained in something, if I was working at ABSA when I was 25, I'd have had to wait for my turn to be trained.
Yes.
Nowadays, I can jump on YouTube, or I can pay for myself to do a different course.
Exactly.
And the younger generation, Gen Y and Gen Z, are taking control of their own careers, taking control of their own learnings, and I love it. I'm all supportive of it. They are their own units, and they will decide how they utilize AI and other software tools to deliver a piece of work. But you're right about the intersectionality as well, that lawyers may not be able to just go, I just do this. They'll have to understand where it's going. But I want to get into that now. Was it just a final part about, I just wanted to ask you about your career, and then I really want career moves. And then I want to just ask you some questions about your work in the gender space and AI and how they link together. And I want to come back on that languages, because I think that's hugely important. But was it an easy decision to leave the bank? Was it hard? Was it difficult?
It was not an easy decision.
It was around COVID time, by the look of it.
And especially during banking. So, fun fact, and shout out to ABSA legal team. Let's be specific here, because compliance always used to look at us and go, these people. But an interesting thing that we did, I know I can throw a bit of shade at them.
Yeah, no,
so
don't worry.
we on the floor that we were in at ABSA, it was compliance and our little glass wall, and then legal and audit. So we had that floor. And what I liked about that team, the legal team, so we were called RBB Legal, so Retail and Business Bank Legal. So different from, obviously, commercial, different from litigation, the different teams that you would get. And so even before COVID, what we did was adopt a flexible and mobile working system. So we would work from home some days, so I was based in CBD, so Barclays Towers, West, the fancy building. So some days I'd work from Sandton.
Is it still called Barclays Towers?
No. Now it's called ABSA Towers West, or Towers West as we know it. I would work from Sandton. I would work from home. I would go to CBD, whatever. So we already had adapted to that before COVID. So when it happened, it was such an easy way for our team to transition, whereas a lot of other people didn't. And I don't want to say, well, people want to micromanage or whatever, but you would hear people like, my boss wants to see us in the office. Sitting there all day.
But
what
if you
for?
can't.
Doesn't make sense. But again, it was that forward-thinking nature of anticipating. Nobody could have anticipated COVID and what the consequences on working culture. But simply saying we want to do things differently, we want to try things differently. We've seen this in the world, whether it's doing things differently, whether you're showing your team you trust them, it doesn't matter. But that change in mindset of doing things differently already without the environment needing to prompt you to do it was really a great way and a good way for me to experience that. And then again, in banking already, you have, anybody who's in banking would tell you have the most amazing benefits. It's a fact. So a lot of people never leave banking or leave the banks or move around the banks because you've got preferential, vehicle asset rates. You've got preferential home loan rates. You've got free banking. You have, if you have a problem with your bank, you're not sitting on a call center. You just get up and you walk directly over to the team and be like, actually, we need to chat, please. So doing that, and we need to be realistic also, right? We live in a country where things are expensive. It's not ideal. Like South Africa is an amazing place to live in, but there are also some downsides to it and some things that we need to be cognizant of. And so sometimes you ask yourself, and I hear this because I see this when we're talking about AI and we're trying to educate people and we're trying to get more diverse voices and viewpoints and companies that are doing AI. And you see this when they're like, well, Desh, it all sounds very idealistic. when you say, oh, be different, go out, do this, do that. And that's not always the case. Sometimes the case is I need my job and these benefits to put food on the table because it does and it works. And right now we know, especially, and I come back to the point of, community culture. Sometimes you are the breadwinner from your family. You are the breadwinner from like 2 or 3 generations. And there's a lot of responsibility on you. So how do you marry these things with this new culture of global working and AI and different things, technology shift, doing an intersectional job? Whereas previously, this was a secure job and it wasn't just your decision alone. Your family may have a say on saying, well, you're leaving something that you know is secure, that you know is paying the bills to go do something else that's kind of new and a little uncertain and you don't really know. So there are these things to consider when you are making those changes. And it's not just a case of leaving law to go somewhere else, because these socioeconomic problems or socioeconomic considerations go across the board for whatever you're doing. And so in that context, the decision was a little easier for me because I have a really supportive family. I have amazing friends, and I, of course, could call upon my mentorship circle that I was in and be like, guys, I don't know, this is crazy. It makes me nervous. It took me a long time. But when I did see the role that was for GIZ, I looked at this and I was like, everything that I've been doing is working up to this point. This looks like my dream job. And lo and behold, of course, and I had a word with HR, you must understand, because this is me, Desh Unfiltered, once I got into the company. But the role was about, we want someone with a computer science degree. We want someone with an IT or related degree. And here's me. I've got a bachelor's and I've got a master's in law. In commercial law, yes, and I've got a lot of experience. I've got tons of operational experience. I know how products work. I know systems work. I know all of that stuff. But here they were recruiting for this AI position, and stereotypically, engineer, IT, computer scientist, data scientist, and I was like, I remember looking at this job and
the
I was
HR
like,
tick box.
The HR tick box. And I was like, holy crap. Well, Desh, this is your moment. You worked for this. Believe in yourself. Apply for this. And interestingly enough, when I got hired, the team told me afterwards, my now boss sitting in Germany, says, actually, Des, the reason why we really liked you to come on board, because one of the things we're looking at is changing the way, or let me say, democratizing AI. And to democratize AI, we want people who are different and bringing different elements into this role. And one of the things they liked, at least I was told, was that I had done a lot of work in the gender space. I'd been in Women in AI, I had done events. You start looking at crafting this gender change around, technology, and just in banking already. We know it's a space and there's a lot of women, but there's a lot of women who are not necessarily heading up technical teams. Still, so, all the work that I didn't know was valuable when you're looking at it from the other side. It was just stuff that I believed in and I thought it was important, in addition to my legal role. And when I got into this role and I interviewed, I remember it was a 2-hour interview, oh my word, and eventually getting hired, they're like, we like that you have this network, that you're a gender champion, that you're looking at things differently, and you have this passion for injustice, because that's what we're trying to do at GIZ, to democratize AI. So it really...
Well done to them.
It clicked with me when I was like, I'm leaving all of these amazing things behind, but it's also a different and new path, and I am scared and I am nervous, and, it's different. But I was excited.
But it's in here. It felt right.
I felt right,
here. Yeah. It's interesting you did bring up the point about the pressure potentially on someone who's leaving an amazing job at ABSA with all the wonderful perks and a great
or
career
any bank
ahead,
or any company
that may have the outside pressures on supplying for the family or and that kind of thing, but feeling inside themselves, but this is the direction I really want to go into, and having to balance that or marry that with the family pressures as well. It's really interesting you brought that up. That's something that we face a lot here, and in other parts of the world as well. But it's that's really in a
nutshell, basically black tax. And just for the listeners or anyone else, black tax is not necessarily in reference to black people, but the concept of black tax, which I can assure you apply to Indian people and Black people or people of color in general, even sometimes just all South Africans. I think now it's just more colloquial term of using black text, where you are this person who's now achieved or deemed to have achieved.
Oh yeah, no,
and now have to support.
I know plenty of white people that have to support their families nowadays as well, which maybe a generation ago they didn't have to. And I think, but also that's not a South African necessarily thing. I spent nearly a decade living in Asia, and in parts of Asia it's very similar. And in fact, most countries in Asia, you're the one supporting your family. And so yes, no, it's an interesting balance when you want to go for something that you know is the right thing for you to do. But look, this is 2 years ago, and I really, there's a couple of other things I want to talk to you about, certainly about your mentoring and your the work in the gender space as well, and how that marries together. So maybe you can tell us about that, maybe how your work in the gender space and promotion thereof, and how that marries into the AI space as well. Sure. And then maybe we can talk about the languages that you touched on as well.
Sure. I do tend to get a bit carried away because it is an important topic. But just flag me down, wave an arm or something, and I will reel myself in. But with regards to the gender, so first things first, we know, or if people who know me professionally, personally, I am rather feminist. So I do believe in shared responsibilities and obviously equal pay for equal work. I am very vocal about also, the responsibilities that women hold that are societal expectations and systemic societal expectations that still now, over and above all of that, still have to compete in the world if they want to become something more or something different. And for example, like all the things I mentioned about me, doing, taking up courses while I was still working. Even when I did my master's, I was lucky enough at the time, or maybe just serendipitous or smart, I don't know, to be living at home. So I would go to work. I was still with my parents then, so just a few years, 2-3 years after I moved up, and then I moved out on my own. But you go to work, you work a full day, you go to lectures in the evening, you come back, you are dog tired, you try and do a little bit of studying, you eat something, take a shower, go to bed, and repeat for 2 years, and then still do a thesis and still do other things in between, and so you have all of these things that you want to do as a person, and your support structure is really important. Now, when we talk about the gender space, we look at, and it's something I mentioned, so at the launch of the AI Association, they had this discussion around education, and people are like, the future of work and jobs, and AI is going to take my job, and I was like, cool, guys, we need to just take 5 steps back. We are South Africa. We are a developing nation. We are not a nation that is already developed, although I do feel that we are on par a lot with developed nations in certain things, like very cool banking sector. But if we're going to all the things we have done so far in the context of education, in the context of capacity development, in the context of women entering the workspace, we know we have a gender digital divide, like it is a thing, and not just South Africa, but most of Global South. We know... Sorry,
I don't mean to interject because you're on a flow, but what do you mean exactly, just for myself and for the listeners, by gender divide?
Cool. So when we talk about the gender digital divide... Yes. So firstly, the gender divide in the context of working, we know that firstly, a lot of sectors are still very highly proliferated by men. Not because that, they're saying we're not going to hire women, but historically and systemically, remember, women had to fight for the right to work, fight for the right to vote, fight for the right to do a lot of things and enter the space, go to study. And again, systemically, we knew that at some point, women weren't allowed to open bank accounts. You had to do it under your father's name. Not that long ago. So all of these years of consequential disparities, at this point, people are like, but women can open a bank account, they could go to work, they could do this. But consequentially, what has happened? It means that men have advanced, and through no fault of their own, right? Yes, of course, there is some element of it saying, well, we're deciding women don't vote because there are places in the kitchen and at home and wherever. Different story, right? We are now in this decade, in this age. But consequentially, what does that mean? Men have had an opportunity to learn, to advance, to be able to financially manage their assets and accounts and own things and do things. So now when women start working and entering these spaces, you're like, but there are not enough qualified women. Why are there not enough qualified women? So now you're just talking about the gender divide, and that's it. And then you overlay that with the societal responsibilities of, so when, we're having a baby, so excited, cool. Now the woman is at home taking care of this child while the guy goes back to work, or in a heteronormative relationship, there's the man and the woman, and most of the time it's the woman who's sacrificing her career to take care of that kid. Traditionally, yes. Yeah. And then you go back and now you don't have an opportunity for bonuses because they're like, you were gone for 6 months. What do you say that you did? And I know this because I come from corporate. Very, very I come from corporate, so I've seen it done to people. And then now or your colleagues have advanced or you have an opportunity. There's this issue of, again, saying, now we need to make allowances for women in the workspace. Why is it an allowance? Because the workspace was traditionally, or any environment, whether it's mining, whether it's engineering, whatever, we now have to make allowances for women or for people identifying as women. Why? Why is it something extra? Because the benchmark or the norm was the fact that it was created by men for men. And whether they knew it or not, and these kind of systemic structures just kind of grew into the
digital space?
In the digital space, but just in the space generally, in the workspace. The corporates, board meetings, all of the stuff, you could do things after hours. After hours, someone has to be home taking care of the kids. So do you see? Yeah. So now you have these systemic structures that have been in place for so long, they're just deemed the norm. Now enter digital. So now you've got digital and they're like, women have access to phones and women have access to the internet and. Cool. But then those systemic structures and those societal expectations have not changed. Women are, and it's factual, it's been proven many times, do majority of the unpaid care work, whether it's domestic work, whether it's caring for family members, whether it's, helping kids or do whatever. All of this unpaid care work, doing grocery shopping, whatever, there is a shift to shared responsibilities now. But when we start talking about making allowances, for example, people are like, but now it's always seemed as something extra. So when we start looking at the gender digital divide and women entering the space, still, and for many vulnerable and marginalized communities, and South Africa is no exception, but especially around Africa, there could be maybe only one phone in the house or one laptop. And how do you think
unlimited power, unlimited
internet, and limited Wi-Fi?
And then I need to do this, so
I need to do that, and my job is more important because I'm bringing home more money. Therefore, you can wait your turn, whatever.
This is a conversation that happens,
and even financially,
many
right?
households.
Because you could have a phone, but where's the data coming from? If you don't have access to sufficient funds, you're not going to get enough funds so fine, you have a phone and you can still learn on your phone and there are amazing things you could do, but you need data. And that data means you need to access data, and where's the money coming from? So when we talk about the gender digital divide, it's women really having access to all of these opportunities to be able to better themselves, in addition and overlaid with the societal expectations of corporate, of their families, of their kids, of whatever. When a kid is sick, the first person they go to is mommy. That's a fact. I still do that.
No.
As a feminist I am.
My father-in-law was a judge and an SC in this country, and we had a conversation once about how when it came to him having to be a judge over family issues, he said 100% of the time he always gave the kids to the woman. And he said, and I said, why? And he said, well, because when kids are sick, they never ask for dad.
And the question is why?
I can see where you were going. I mean, obviously,
but
50 years ago, but
it's still,
I can
right?
see what you're saying.
And it's still systemic conditioning. I mean, if now we have companies that have amazing parental schemes, and GIZ is one of them, where like the dads could stay home and, spend a month with the kids growing up, or 2 months, or whatever.
The gender digital divide is not something I'd ever heard of until I spoke to you, and it's something that I'm really interested to explore on hopefully a further podcast in the future with yourself and others, because that is a really interesting topic. So I will not only just that. Sorry to interject, but also an old friend of mine from years ago, Sajal Patel, a lady I lived close by to in Hong Kong. She was in the finance space and she broke away. I think she moved to Singapore actually, and then broke away and set up a business. You can find her online, specifically targeting financial services products for women. Because she was talking of similar.
But that's exactly.
I don't know if she used the same term as gender digital divide, but she's like, there's nothing available. Like it's all designed by men for men. And I'm going to put you two in touch because you need
please do. Talk, yeah. But just coming back to the point of education. So we're saying all of these decades, the way people are expected to learn is at a benchmark that's not inclusive, and certainly not inclusive for, global south. So let's just forget about global south. For South Africa, we know we've had load shedding. Load shedding is a thing, and a lot of people still rely on Eskom for power. The concept of solar and stuff is really reserved for a very privileged few percent.
Yeah.
So if you now have all the things that I mentioned on the gender digital divide, and now you want to say, oh, well, everyone has access to the internet, we should all upskill and we should all do these things. And even from what I said, take hold of your career. It's difficult for women to do that because you've got a systemic space that's set up. And now you've got all these overlays of societal expectation, children, family members, whatever. And now you're still saying, cool, let's have a class of learning between 4 to 6 p.m. or 2 to 4 p.m. You can't expect for us as a country to move forward and be, internet ready or AI ready or technologically advanced if you're going to expect people to do the same things that we did previously to get here and expect inclusivity and equality. It's not going to work.
It's fascinating what you say there, because what you're making me think of is just this, or making
layers and
layers and layers and layers, and then going, well, you've got the internet. Like,
do your thing.
I get it, and I it's a topic we definitely need to discuss again. I would love to pick your brains on it. I think it's fascinating. I'd love to find out what you're doing in it. You clearly championing that space, and that's something
we have a special project we're running now called the AI and Data Science Bootcamp for Women, but we can chat about it separately. But it's exactly that. It's curated for a bootcamp that's curated for women for South Africa, taking into account the local context, taking into account all the barriers that women face, and now trying to give them an edge and an opportunity. It's already underway, so you probably would have seen my posts on LinkedIn and stuff about it. And it's for particularly women who are graduates or even some postgraduates, but we know we have a high graduate unemployment rate in South Africa as well.
That's another topic we can discuss, especially in the law
this
space,
activity is specifically designed and curated for that, but we can delve into it in a nice, juicy way.
I would love to. I'd love to really focus on, because obviously the purpose of this podcast is to find out about you and your journey, and obviously this is now where you're heading. And I think it deserves to be. Well, next time when I'm up here and you've got 5 hours spare, we'll talk about it. But I think what I'd like to, you mentioned you were doing mentoring. That's something that's quite big, and there's something. Is that all interjected? Is this part of it? The boot camps and things like that?
Yes and no. So in my case, I was mentored, and I volunteer my time to do mentoring. So in 2 ways. So a few years ago, I applied. So Yolanda Kuba is the vice president for MTN, so Southern Eastern Africa, and you've probably seen her doing very cool things. And a few years ago, she did an application. She ran this cohort called the YC Mentorship Circle, and you had to apply to get in. And I did. And I was super stoked and super excited. And when I mentioned earlier, I had this professional circle of different people from different backgrounds and different ages, but just the most amazing, brilliant brains. Like there's about 15 of us or so. And we all were in this mentorship circle, and it happened. It started just before COVID. So our first year and a bit of the circle, we were kind of all doing the digital stuff, but it was incredible that she took the time to set up this mentorship circle, to do the mentoring. I mean, I've met Tokyo, Sequala. It was brilliant. We've had access to many people through this, and through her wisdom and sharing with us and expanding. And you would see, as part of the Mandela Day initiative, she does this every year. So she's very big on mentoring. And you almost hear this concept. And oftentimes, even lawyers, they'll tell you, find a mentor. And people also I don't think we understand. I never understood enough what that truly meant. Because you're just thinking, well, I'm going to chat to Rob because Rob's super knowledgeable and ask him some questions and go away and then come back and ask him more questions. And I feel like mentoring in that way, that's what I understood to be mentoring previously. And when I finally got into a circle where I had these amazing, incredible brains, I mean, and Yolanda just giving us her words of wisdom and sharing and peer learning. It was the first time that I could actually sit down and understand and say, I can learn something from someone from a different background, but who has different journeys and words of wisdom to share. And we can all engage and we can all debate and we could look at different things in a very respectful and open and engaged way. And it was brilliant. And also she encouraged people to take up, join the mentorship boardroom, where people could mentor others. And you could go on there. It's an easy platform to use. So I'm available on there as well. And you could host a session. And for the mentors and mentees, it's a very easy platform. So you can do it as your availability allows. So for me, that's very big on giving back in some way and giving lessons. And it could be different things, right? It's not, I don't have all the world's wisdom. As a matter of fact, a lot of the time I feel like I'm not smart enough and I keep like I need to do more. And so I'm able to share when and as I can. And oftentimes, even in meetings, I will give out my email and be like, hey guys, if you have a question, just drop me a mail. Now, how does that come back to women in the gender digital divide and AI? I feel like it's really important for us as a society, when we're looking at democratizing AI and making it more fair and making it more representative and inclusive. So it's not another thing that's imposed on us being South Africa, us being Africa, us being the global South, from, nations who are, and probably areas or companies who do not have a contextualized or local understanding of what we need, what we want, but are happily taking our data to provide a service to us that we may pay for. Maybe not financially when you use social media, but you're definitely paying for it, Yeah.
You're the commodity
yeah.
somewhere.
If it's free, you are the product.
Yeah.
So
that's a famous saying about Facebook, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
So how does all of this come back down? So we feel like it's very important, not just from a gender perspective, but from a South African perspective, that we see people in the space that we can resonate and look to and identify with. I want to be someone who another person looks and be like, hey, Desh, you're there, but you're from Durban, no? You're from South Africa, no? But you understand and you can talk to someone and you understand and they relate to you. And when you have that internet connection of, oh, this person is creating this product or service, they understand problems, they understand load shedding, they know what it's like to come home and be frustrated and you have no idea why. It's just that anger that load shedding brings, But
it's an unbelievable anger that cannot be described.
That is really honestly quite indescribable.
It's like a disappointment, but an anger.
And the anxiety of when you're supposed to get load shed but don't get load shed and you're waiting for it.
That's sometimes worse.
So somebody who understands this and is creating technology in a way that takes into account these concepts. People should see people who represent them and who are them that they can resonate with, and that is going to create more uptake on AI and feel that AI is being democratized. And that's the only way it's going to be democratized. And the only way we can do that is being intentional about how we create products and services, who gets a seat on the table and what they have to say about it. And that from a gender point of view, but just generally from us in South Africa.
That are beautiful words. I promise you. I don't often say that, but I don't, and I kind of want to almost leave it there because and pick up again in the future and talk specifically about the work that you're doing now. But I think that will resonate with listeners. I think that will resonate with everybody who listens. But it also, for me, really just brings together exactly the person I think that you are. That child you mentioned who was always inquisitive and asking questions. And it's almost like, again, I don't want to use this term because it sounds cheesy, but it's almost like you've found your calling. And I don't even need to know. I don't even need to ask you what's coming next in Desh's life because we know. And that is perfect. But is there anything, just to end on one final question, is there anything that you're doing at the moment? Anything that you haven't already mentioned? What's next for you?
Oh my. I would like to do more of this and probably have more impact. I feel like, and this is very common, obviously, that technology advances, but people kind of advance with it in a way. But then there's also the regulatory element that doesn't advance, which leaves room for either innovation or abuse, depending on how you look at it. I would, honestly, my journey would be to do more of this on a more global scale. I feel like the impact we have is good, but it's not enough to keep up with the movement of technology. I would welcome people to get in touch with me if you want to, you know.
All your links will be below. Yeah,
for sure. Create awareness, and also more importantly, I think to do more to remove the fear around technology and technology advancement. I feel like a lot of people, but particularly women, are still afraid because they feel, back to my, my job spec, be an engineer and be an IT person. And I feel like that is, more has to be done. More has to be done to almost bring some kind of a balance. And we know, and I said it earlier, that, equality and fairness these are fluid concepts. Like what we thought was, what we deem as inappropriate today, 50 years ago was perfectly fine. And not because I'm saying it is perfectly fine, because nobody in society thought to challenge it. And I give you a very quick example. Now, as South Africa, we know we're a very open country on LGBTQIA+. So on same-sex partnerships, same-sex rights, etc. And some countries are not there. And some countries are actively against it. And for now, it's inappropriate when you discriminate. But 50 years ago, nobody thought there was a problem. You saw 50 years ago, there were no laws dealing with that. And at that point, no one was challenging it. And everybody thought that was perfectly acceptable, that it was okay that you could discriminate because, they were othered. And that was deemed fair. Nobody stood up to say that law is unfair. So at that point in time, ethics looked at things differently. And even in the case of transgender, nobody was like, oh, that's unfair, we can't discriminate against people. People could say what they wanted, and no judge was ever going to say that's inappropriate or that's hate speech. And now, 25, 30 years later, it's a whole different story. So
in certain parts of the world.
And in certain parts of the world. So very fluid. And I feel like getting the fear and removing that fear and removing that stigma is something I would want to do more and more at a global scale. And I would absolutely welcome people who share this passion and who share this ideal. I mean, maybe I'm still living in a little idealistic dash world of the world being fair and equal and nice and sunshine and rainbows. But I think the fight will go on. And for me, that is where I would see myself going.
Well, I could speak for the listeners and for myself. I think the industries that you touch and the South Africa as a whole and as a global citizen, I think we're in a better place with people like you in it, fighting. I really genuinely mean that. So thank you for all the work you're doing. I'm going to get you back in the studio and we're going to talk more about the work that you're actually doing on the AI space. I think that is... we might need to block out the 4-hour session because I think that's... But I thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for everything and thanks for your time. And yes, hopefully I'll see you very soon.
Hopefully, but thank you, Rav. Those are very kind words and I've had lots of fun. But yes, we could delve into nice, juicy topics and I have some very interesting things that you would like to hear about.